The early summer of 1968 tested the very soul of the American conscience. At its center stood Senator Robert Francis Kennedy, newly declared candidate for the Democratic nomination, champion of civil rights, and tireless advocate for economic justice. In the early hours of June 6, 1968, after spending the previous night celebrating a decisive victory in the California presidential primary, Robert Kennedy succumbed to wounds inflicted only hours earlier. He was 42 years old, leaving behind a widow, Ethel, and 11 children, the youngest of whom would be born after his death. When his brother John F. Kennedy appointed him Attorney General in 1961, Robert Kennedy assumed a role of extraordinary visibility and influence. As the president's closest confidant, he directed the Department of Justice at a pivotal moment in American history, guiding civil rights legislation from aspiration to reality. The passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 would reshape the nation's landscape, and Robert Kennedy's fingerprints were evident at every turn. Following President John F. Kennedy's assassination in Dallas in November 1963, Robert remained as Attorney General under President Lyndon B. Johnson for another year. Yet by early 1964, he opted to seek a seat in the United States Senate. Winning the New York seat that November, he broadened his reputation as an unapologetic voice for the marginalized. No longer content with mere enforcement of laws, he spoke of poverty, racial segregation, and economic inequality in moral terms, an imperative rather than a series of policy debates. As 1968 dawned, the nation reeled from a series of traumas that reshaped its consciousness. The Vietnam War raged on, catalyzing an ever-growing anti-war movement. On April 4th, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. triggered riots in over 100 cities, laying bare the depth of racial anguish. By March 31st, President Johnson acknowledged the enormity of the moment, announcing that he would not seek re-election. 4 days later, Robert Kennedy seized this historic opening and declared his candidacy, vowing to forge unity from anguish. Kennedy's campaign in early 1968 was more than a political gambit. He embarked on a moral crusade, traveling through Appalachia and the Mississippi Delta, listening to sharecroppers, miners, and impoverished families. These journeys were never photo opportunities. They were earnest endeavors to understand firsthand the burdens of poverty and systemic injustice. As he spoke in urban neighborhoods and college campuses, his message resonated. Racial reconciliation, economic fairness, and an end to the Vietnam War were not mutually exclusive goals, but interconnected components of a just society. On June 4, 1968, Robert Kennedy swept the California primary, an outcome that positioned him as the front-runner for the Democratic nomination. That night, the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles overflowed with supporters, athletes, and Hollywood celebrities, united by hope that a new chapter in American politics was within reach. Kennedy's acceptance speech brimmed with optimism. He declared that America was ready to transcend its divisions and embrace a unified future. Yet as Kennedy left through a rear corridor, radiating energy and surrounded by jubilant fans, among them Olympic decathlete Rafer Johnson and football star Roosevelt Grier, fate intervened. A 24-year-old Palestinian emigre named Sirhan Sirhan concealed a .22 caliber revolver beneath a rolled-up campaign poster. Positioned barely a foot away, he unleashed a rapid volley of bullets. Kennedy collapsed, struck multiple times in the head and chest. In the ensuing pandemonium, 5 bystanders were wounded before Johnson and Grier subdued the assailant. An ambulance rushed Kennedy to Good Samaritan Hospital. Through the night, surgeons fought valiant battles to save him, but at 1:44 a.m. on June 6th, they announced that Robert F. Kennedy had died. The nation, already reeling from Dr. King's murder and still haunted by President Kennedy's assassination 4.5 years earlier, fell into collective mourning. For Ethel Kennedy and their children, Mark, Kathleen, Joseph, Robert Jr., Michael, Mary Courtney, David, Douglas, Rory, Carrie, and the unborn son who would arrive that August. This was an irrevocable moment of personal and national tragedy. At trial, Sirhan Sirhan admitted his guilt, professing that he believed Kennedy bore responsibility for the plight of Palestinians. On March 3, 1969, a Los Angeles jury sentenced him to death. But in 1972, California's Supreme Court commuted his sentence to life imprisonment, overturning capital punishment. For decades, debates over his motivations and mental state have swirled among legal scholars and conspiracy theorists. Yet the essential truth remains. Robert Kennedy's life was cut short before he could fully realize his vision for America. Politically, Kennedy's death fundamentally altered the trajectory of the 1968 election. With California's delegates no longer bound by a primary mandate, Vice President Hubert H. Humphrey secured the Democratic nomination at a convention overshadowed by violence in Chicago. Struggling to distance himself from President Johnson's unpopular war policies, Humphrey faced Republican nominee Richard Nixon, who appealed to what he called the silent majority and promised law and order. On November 5, 1968, Nixon emerged victorious, ushering in a conservative tide that would reverberate through American politics for decades. But Robert Kennedy's impact transcends electoral tallies. In June 1963, as U.S. Attorney General, he personally ensured that James Meredith could integrate the University of Mississippi. His actions signaled a new precedent: federal intervention on moral grounds in the service of justice. As senator, he continued to shed light on poverty's human cost, often venturing beyond the spotlight to meet Americans whose voices were seldom heard in Washington. Kennedy's philosophy rejected divisions as immutable. Instead, he argued that government could and should serve as an instrument of compassion. By 1968, his opposition to Vietnam was resolute. In March of that year, he advocated a phased withdrawal of U.S. troops and renewed peace talks in Paris. This was no rhetorical maneuver. He recognized that the war's human toll eroded America's moral standing abroad and deepened domestic fractures. His ability to galvanize younger voters, African Americans, Hispanics, and working-class whites hinted at a coalition capable of reshaping the Democratic Party's platform around unity rather than division. As historians and political analysts reflect from the vantage point of 2025, debate persists over how different America might have been had Robert Kennedy survived that night at the Ambassador Hotel. Some contend that his charisma and moral authority could have accelerated civil rights gains and hastened an end to the Vietnam War. Others caution that party elites, entrenched economic interests, and the era's polarization might have constrained even his formidable talents. Nonetheless, his enduring ethos of civic engagement and belief in government's capacity for social justice continues to resonate. Beyond speculation lies a concrete legacy. In 1968, Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. established the RFK Awards to honor contributions to human rights, social justice, and philanthropy. The Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights, founded that same year, carries forward his mission to this day. Every May 27th, thousands gather in the Bronx, where he once served as congressman, to honor his memory at the Boston Post Road homestead. Educational programs bearing his name inspire young people to embrace public service, reaffirming that leadership grounded in compassion can forge a brighter future, even in the darkest of times. The assassination of Robert F. Kennedy on June 5, 1968, stands as both a moment of tragic loss and a catalyst for ongoing reflection. It marked the abrupt end of a campaign many believed could have bridged America's profound divisions. Yet the ideals he championed, racial equality, economic justice, and an end to unnecessary violence, remain as urgent in our own time as they were a half-century ago. He asked a nation to reconcile its professed values with the realities of prejudice and poverty. He challenged Americans to consider what role their country should play on the world stage, especially when its policies inflicted suffering abroad. In remembering him, we honor not just who he was, but who we might yet become. A nation capable of aligning its highest ideals with its actions, a nation that believes in unity through compassion. Thank you for joining us on this historical journey. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more captivating stories from our past. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.